All right. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A feature, and we'll do our best to answer as many as possible at the end. Before we dive in, I'd like to share a bit about the Northland SBDC services and how you can access them. Then I'll turn things over to Ravina and Brendan, our lead presenters for today. So the Northland SBDC provides no cost and confidential technical assistance to small businesses and entrepreneurs throughout the Northeast 7 counties of Minnesota. We can help people in a variety of ways, from understanding finances, like cash flow and projections, describing customers, creating a business plan, and walking through the process of financing a business. We also have subject matter expert consultants available to work with, providing no-cost assistance in specific areas such as marketing, human resources, IT, and QuickBooks or bookkeeping. So if you're a current small business owner or an entrepreneur looking to start a business, you can access our services by visiting our website at northlandsbdc.org and clicking the red Request for Services button. And then we'll get you connected with a consultant in your area that'll work with you one-on-one. So that's just a brief overview of Northland SBDC and our services. Today we have Ravina Claxton, our Northland SBDC subject matter expert in human resources, and Brendan C. with the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, joining us to give us more knowledge around Minnesota unemployment. Ravina, would you please introduce yourself and kick off our webinar?
Sure thing. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning. I'm Ravina Claxton. I'm the HR consultant with the Northeast Small Business Development Center, as well as the South Central Region Business Development Center. I have been with the SBDC for 6 years now. Prior to that, spent a number of years in all three things HR, all areas of human resources, and also with my husband managed a small retail store in the Twin Cities for 17 years. So I'm very familiar with the challenges of business closures, i.e. COVID, the protest closures, and I can say from personal experience, the best approach for you as a small business owner is to be prepared to the very best of your ability. I don't think it is possible to be totally prepared in the event of business closure because they're all somewhat different. But it will, thinking through some of the things that we want to talk about today, will help increase your confidence as a small business owner navigating some really unprecedented times or times where the answers aren't known or easy to come by. So trying to be prepared to the best of your ability is key. Some of the hard questions that your employees want to know, and this makes a big difference as to whether or not they will stay by your side, is what are the emergency contacts? What should they do? Where should they go for the most up-to-date information? So it's important to have and maintain up-to-date contact info for all your employees. Let them know how you're going to reach them if the normal channels are down. Will you have a group text, a phone tree? Will you set up a voicemail on your main line where they can go and get a recording every day telling them what the current status is? Those are some of the most important things to think about to have that one-stop shop for them to go to know the latest and greatest. Think about your pay and your leave policies. Decide how you're going to manage pay. And one of the things we're going to obviously talk about today are the unemployment benefits that they may be eligible for. Communicate in advance to the best of your ability on those items as well. And then it's important to think about your business flexibility. Do you have staff that are cross-trained and that can fill in? All disasters, from my experience, or business closures, are unique in terms of the details of why. And for example, in a wildfire, your business may be open, but your employees may live in an evacuation zone. So they may be unable to come to work. and you may need to backfill their responsibilities. So thinking about the best cross-training that you could have in place. And always remember that uncertainty about a paycheck is the first crisis that our employees are going to face. Obviously, the first crisis you're facing is a loss of revenue, but think about your employees from the loss of their paycheck. And you want them to come back as soon as possible. So try to communicate early and honestly, even if it's just a what if scenario. Be sure to think about what you know, what you don't know, if and when to report to work, and how pay will be handled. If you think you might have to cover hours or cut hours or cut headcount, tell employees right up front. And so that they can file for unemployment, look for other benefits, and to the best of your ability, keep them close so that if you are able to call them back, they are immediately available. Expect some of the toughest questions. From my experience, I recently had a business closure in a small business for an emergency, and meeting with a group of the business owner, meeting with a group of 30, 35 employees in the back of the room. A person called out, "Are you going to have to close the business forever and lose the business because of this crisis?" So you may not know the answers, but it will increase your confidence in your ability to communicate and try to instill some sense of calm with your employees if you can think about maybe the worst questions. And then, of course, remembering that you have an obligation to meet your payroll requirements. So that's a legal requirement. It's also the fastest path to recovery. Employees who are treated well and have regular communication, know exactly what's going on, know that you're there to provide either support or help them get to places where they will get support, helps you to be able to call them back as soon as possible and rebuild your revenue stream. Remember that earned sick and safe time, employers have to make anything that they have accrued, or if you've used the front-loading method on the earned sick and safe time from Minnesota, that Minnesota benefit, that has to be made available to employees, because by state law, earned sick and safe time, once it's accrued or front-loaded in their bank, it has to be made available. And one of the reasons that it needs to be paid is when there is a closure of the employee's workplace due to a public emergency. So plan for that. Now, that will have an impact on unemployment benefits, but that is, a full pay, full hourly pay for however much they have in their bank that they can use. And finally, remember that there are a wide variety of resources for employees and for employers, and those are offered in the state. These are some numbers to call. We'll have this in your materials afterward. Minnesota 211 is the United Way Housing Helpline. There's a FEMA emergency line if there is a federally declared emergency that you're dealing with. And then, of course, the mental health crisis hotline is 988. So do watch for signs of stress, both in yourself as well as with your employees, and share mental health resources openly. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brendan to talk about unemployment in detail.
Hi, my name is Brendan Shizelski. Thanks for having me here. I know we introduced me as Brendan C, but that's mainly just because of the mouthful that my last name is. But I work for the Department of Employment and Economic Development. We're based out of St. Paul. We do have a few satellite offices throughout the state. I've worked with UI for 10 years now. That's quite a long time. I've worked with multiple different agencies, applicants, employers. I've worked with the Department of Labor on several different kind of quality control audits. And speaking of those, I kind of ran the federal unemployment audit program here. We call it the Quality Control Program. I ran that error-free, I'm happy to say, for several years. Other things in my area are handling reemployment activities and this kind of emergency disaster preparedness kind of information. Yeah, and next slide. So we just wanted to go over some of the resources that we have for employees, employers during any kind of situation like this. The main thing that we have is our standard unemployment insurance program. It's available year round. The thing with with this program is that it's an eligibility based program. The main kind of through point is that an individual would be unemployed through no fault of their own, and so disaster certainly would be a prime example of that. There's resources and guides available online. We do have our call center that's opened. We have a designated employer call center as well. So we have a team that's ready and available to take any kind of questions from either applicants or employers. They're available Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30, and the online sources are available Sunday through Friday. They're closed on Saturday because we have to do site maintenance and we do data dumps and all sorts of other fun stuff in the background. The other part is that for seasonal employees who leave the area for other work during a disaster, they're what we would qualify as what's called a workforce risk. So the intent is to keep them connected to that area so that that way it hopefully prevent any kind of future staffing gaps, but it definitely want to document any staffing gaps now for any kind of future workforce assistance that you might need. Next slide. The UI process for applicants is pretty straightforward. They can apply immediately when they're unemployed or when their hours are reduced. Again, we've got our phone hours up there, Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30. We've got the greater Minnesota number there, or if you want to look online, it's ui.mn.gov. We did recently move over to the .gov site. Prior to this, it was uimn.org. That site will automatically redirect you to our new one. And again, the application hours, Sunday through Friday, 6 to 8 p.m. Those will be available for you online. The best advice that we can give is to answer any questions thoroughly and honestly. And for a situation specifically like this, we'd want to use keywords like natural disaster, evacuation, wildfire. That way, those terms can be picked up on it during any kind of adjudication process. Eligibility and benefit amounts do depend on several different factors. So it's not just necessarily the reason for being unemployed. There's other things that do go into it. For any questions about what exactly the benefit amount might look like, what kind of the eligibility requirements are, you can either visit those online sites or you can call us with any questions. The other thing that we want to let you know is that the determination letters are sent out by mail. They are also posted online for both employers and applicants. So through the online portal, either as an applicant or an employer, you can view any of those determinations right there on that portal. And next slide. So a continuation for the application process, a lot of applicants, I should say some applicants tend to or can forget that to request a benefit payment that they should do so every week. And that's basically so you can get paid for every week. They must request that benefit payment each week. And they should do so even if they're waiting for an eligibility determination or an appeal determination. When folks first file, sometimes there'll be what's called a pending issue on the account, and pending issue makes it sound like something's gone horribly wrong, but an issue is really just anything that we need to ask additional questions about, and they should continue to request during that pending status, because once that pending issue is resolved, if determined eligible, all those pending payment requests will process automatically. If they don't make the payment requests, they don't process. The first eligible week is what we call the non-payable week. Back in the day, we used to call it the waiting week. But basically, that first week of eligibility is not paid. And there's only one non-payable week per 52-week benefit year. So if somebody is inactive, they reactivate their account later, they don't have to serve another non-payable week. It's only for that 152-week benefit year. Those requests should be on time. And again, we've got our hours there. And the other thing is that with that non-payable week, the first benefit payment, the earliest somebody could receive that benefit payment is the third week after establishing that account. And that's also because of how the payment request process works. You're never actually requesting for the current week that you're in. It's always for the week behind you. So this week, July 26th, if somebody were to log in today on July 29th and make a payment request, it would actually be for last week, July 19th, not this current week of the July 26th. So that's why it's always that third week, because you're actually always requesting for 1 week behind you. And next slide. The other things that the other things to know, what we like to call must-dos, is that even if you're working and your hours are kind of fluctuating, they should still continue to request those benefit payments. So that way they can keep moving through their account and moving forward through the payment requests. When they're doing that, if they are working partial hours, they do want to make sure that they're reporting their earnings. That includes tips and other things like that. With that verification, the system will determine the benefit amount. So it'll look at the numbers that they report. It'll say, all right, here's what your weekly benefit amount is. Here's what the earnings are that you've reported. And it'll do that calculation for them automatically to say, all right, and here's what the benefit amount you're going to receive is. And if they miss a week, the good news is those weeks do stick around. They don't immediately get ejected. They stick around for up to 3 weeks. So if somebody misses a week, they can log back in online and they can still request that previous week. The reason that we talk about the earnings portion, though, is because if somebody does misreport or doesn't report their earnings, there is the possibility of what's called a misrepresentation penalty being put on the account. So it's basically a 40% penalty that would be put on that overpayment, as we call it. And it does have the potential to accrue interest over time. So basically, if somebody's going to be working part-time hours, they just want to make sure that they're reporting their earnings as accurately as they can to avoid any of those kind of overpayment situations. And next slide. I think we went backwards one.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I know our slides are fun. I know we want to do them again, but and speaking of earnings, there is other income that affects benefit payments. And a lot of these things, besides earnings, will trigger one of those issues that we talked about. And that'll trigger a questionnaire to go out to the applicant and to you as the employer. Both of those will also be available on the online portal for the applicant and for you as the employer to respond to. But some of those things that'll trigger those issues are vacation pay, any of that sick time, PTO, the pension, workers' comp, severance, any of those will trigger what's called an issue, and that'll have that paperwork go out to both you and the applicant. Earnings, self-employment, tips and commissions, temporary work, those don't tend to trigger what we call issues or questionnaires to go out. Like as we said before, the system just kind of automatically will calculate that. The one thing that I do want to highlight here is that not all bonuses are considered to be deductible. Typically, that's only bonuses due to separation. So if it's an annual bonus or a performance-based bonus, somebody does a really good job this season and they get an extra $100, typically that would not be deductible against unemployment insurance, just as a FYI. And next slide. The other thing is that there are ongoing eligibility requirements for unemployment insurance. As we kind of talked about at the beginning, most people tend to think about the reason for separation as the primary eligibility requirement or the threshold that they have to meet in order to start collecting unemployment insurance. There are ongoing eligibility requirements as well. The main thing to think about is being available for work, actively seeking work, and able to work. So that means being physically able to work. So the must look for and the being available, that's the actively seeking and the being available part. Actively looking for work, even if working part-time or furloughed. The good news here is that staying in touch with a seasonal employer or somebody that they're temporarily laid off from counts as seeking work. So for example, we have a new population of folks that are coming through the paraprofessionals for school districts. A lot of them will call us and ask, and they'll say, hey, why do I need to be looking for a brand new job? I already have a job I'm going back to in the fall. And our response is, we're not asking you to leave your full-time permanent employer. What we're asking you to do is to stay in contact with them to see if there's any assignments over the summer or even find a temporary job over the summer. We're not trying to steal the workforce away from anybody. It's really just one of those eligibility requirements that that they need to be seeking work. And then as far as that goes, when somebody is seeking work, sometimes they find work. And whether that's with their employer that they're temporarily laid off from or somebody that they're going back to seasonally, they don't necessarily need to notify us through the UI system that they're going back to work. They don't need to call and say, hey, I'm going back to work tomorrow. It's nice to hear, but they don't need to let us know. Through that payment request process, they can actually mark on there, I'm returning to work. That'll inactivate the account for them, or they can also stop requesting if they've returned full time. If they return full time, they can stop requesting, and after 4 weeks, the account automatically goes inactive. If they're starting back midweek, they still can request for that partial week to see if they qualify. And next slide. And some of the other things that we like to highlight, we saw this happen a lot during COVID. We like to blame lots of stuff on the pandemic, and by us, I mean us as people, not just UI. Um, but it did bring to light a lot of security concerns that we want to make sure that people are being aware of. That when you're making passwords for your account as an employer or an applicant, that you want to do your best to keep them private. You want to keep your address on your account current for at least 4 years, because sometimes when we do reviews, as I said, I worked for the quality control unit. Some of those reviews happen about a year later. So it's always a good idea to make sure that the address is up to date. You never want to necessarily pay a third party for help for that, or for filing unemployment insurance or for handling your claims. And you want to be careful of any of the information that you find on social media. We call them phishing scams with a PH, not an FISH. But the phishing scams, they'll try and get information from you to access your account and get access to all sorts of personal private data. We don't communicate through text or social media. And if you do get an email from us, be wary of any links. It's always a good idea to be on the safer side of this stuff. And again, to just be wary of those phishing scams, claims of an account error, incomplete application. Some of these things can install malware on your computer or ransomware even. And then, of course, report anything that you might think anything that you might think is either an imposter or fraud. There's a link online to report it. You can call in and report it. And of course, we'll take a look at that kind of stuff. And next slide. And now the big question, will your account be charged for claims? Specifically for this wildfire situation, there is a provision in Minnesota state law where disaster-related unemployment insurance, if it's 25% or more of the employees of an affected location, the charges can be waived. So what we do with these kinds of situations is first we address like the immediate need, which is, all right, people are out of work. How do we assist? And then the benefit charges, we can basically address that as those claims or as those charges are starting to be reviewed. There'll be a way for us to kind of look at the wage history of applicants, of locations, and to be able to figure out if the charges should be waived. When the charges are being calculated, that's the time to kind of call the employer line and say, hey, I have a question about my charges, and to kind of get that figured out at that time. But yeah, those disaster-related claims can be, we can use those records to basically exclude qualifying claims from future rate increases. So any unemployment charges that are due to the disaster should not impact your rate moving forward, is the short answer on that one. But yeah, I think that's the end of my slide. So I'll turn it back over to either Jenny or Rovina.
All right. Thank you everyone for joining us. If you have any questions, go ahead and we'll take a couple minutes to add those to the Q&A. Whether you have questions for Ravina or for Brendan, we can go ahead and put them in that Q&A. And we'll just wait a few minutes for that before we wrap things up. While we're doing that, I just want to remind you that there'll be a link for a survey that'll pop up on your screen as we close this webinar. We'd appreciate your input by completing that survey. If you need any more information on upcoming trainings, those are on our website, northlandsbdc.org, on the trainings calendar. And for any one-on-one technical assistance in the future, you can register through our website also. I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A. Anything else additionally you would like to add, Ravina or Brendan?
I don't think so. Just please reach out for assistance if you have any questions at all.
Yeah, same for me. Thanks for having me. Thanks for being here. And if you have any questions, either as an applicant or an employer, feel free to give us a call.
All right, and we will also be sending out these slides and a recording from the webinar. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us today.